The documentary available today, America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys. It chronicles Jerry Jones and the era of the Cowboys, the good years, the 90s, the dynasty, but also some controversies and key figures. Maclain Way is the producer, director, and he and his brother, they've done a wonderful job with Netflix, with the Untold documentaries. Who set the parameters here, Maclain, of what you could and could not talk about with the Cowboys?
We did. It's like Jerry it was one of our first questions when we hopped on the project. You always want to know, like, wait, who gets to control what goes in and what goes out of a project? And luckily, we've been making documentaries with Netflix for over 10 years, and they're really trusted partners, and we work with them a lot. And ultimately, they got to kind of decide as we would send them cuts and things like that. So Jerry was an open book. There were no questions that were off the table, and honestly, he was like incredibly supportive of the documentary and what we made. And when we showed him the documentary, he said that there were very painful reminders for him. So I think he liked parts of it. I think there were other parts that were a little tough for him to watch, but all in all, he's very supportive.
What era does this cover?
Yeah, this is mostly focused on like the early 90s. I think episode 7 gets us about halfway through to what the Michael Irvin trial was, which was happened about 3 weeks after they won their third Super Bowl. So it's mostly chronological and linear, but starts with Jerry striking oil and netting himself $100 million, going and buying the Dallas Cowboys from Bum Bright, firing Tom Landry and igniting an incredible amount of controversy. Brings in Jimmy Johnson, his friend from, when he was 17 years old. They win back-to-back Super Bowls, massive divorce between the two of them. Brings in Barry Switzer to win one more. And then we kind of quickly get into, kind of the downfall, the decline of this team on the field and this 30-year streak of not really being able to replicate that Super Bowl success.
What's the wildest story in the documentary?
There was a lot. I mean, I think that this documentary is like a big reason why we jumped on it is a bit of a murderer's row of talking heads. Like, yes, Jerry is a big and larger than life character. Jimmy is as well. You got Michael, Troy, Emmett, and then you got Dion. He comes in episode 5. So that was a huge reason why we obviously jumped at this. There were fun stories about the halftime, the first Super Bowl at Pasadena, because Michael Jackson played the halftime show. And so Michael Irvin and Charles Haley dipped out on Jimmy Johnson's halftime speech to go watch Michael Jackson do Thriller at the Rose Bowl. And so stuff like that was things that I didn't quite know about. But as these guys roll into these stories, all of a sudden they're telling you about how they go watch Michael Jackson. So stuff like that was always super fun.
Did Dion talk about going to a hotel room and walking in and seeing Michael in bed with a bunch of women? And Dion said, "Mike, I don't live this way," and walked out of the hotel room?
It's a story that sounds familiar. I don't think it was Deion Sanders. I heard that story from Michael, but it was Terrell Owens. And it was Terrell Owens that came into a hotel room, and it was right after
There
Mike
might
Tyson.
there might be a number of people who experienced that
It's
story.
true. It's true.
Just to be honest with you, but it was Dion.
You have some
Yeah.
options of people that you want to choose from, but I heard it was Mike Tyson after he got out of prison, and they all went into a limo and had a nice suite in Vegas. And Terrell Owens came in, and his eyes got as big as saucers. And apparently, he said, I don't live this life. I can't do this." And so Mike and Mike scared away T.O. Apparently, is the story that I was told.
We learn anything new about Jimmy Johnson's exit from the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the access to both Jerry and Jimmy was fundamental and crucial to why we wanted to make this documentary series. And I know that they've spoken at length, almost separately, about their relationship. And then when they have gotten together to chat about it, it's maybe like a short segment that they did on Fox. But for us, our opportunity was we got to sit down with Jimmy for a full day, I think 7 hours of interviews, and we filmed with him a couple more days. And then Jerry, we interviewed for about 40 hours. So for us, the opportunity to go deep with these guys was really what drew us to it. And obviously, I know that it's been covered for years, and I think that there is an element of this is true, which is their egos got too big. They had a massive credit argument, and they tried to claim more credit than the other one felt. And I certainly think that that's a part of their story. But for us, we tried to go a little bit deeper. For Jerry, I felt that what ultimately I ended up kind of feeling as I made this documentary series was this was a guy who had a transformative experience in college. It was the best moment of his life. He won the 1964 national championship at the University of Arkansas. Years later, he nets himself $100 million, and he does what maybe I would do or my friends would do if they won $100 million overnight. They go and they buy the Dallas Cowboys. And I think he did that in an attempt to kind of recapture a really big, beautiful, transformative part of his life in college. And he hires a guy that he's known since he's 17 years old. But Jimmy's point is like, Jerry, you hired me to do a job, and I need to go out and convince these players day in, day out to go sacrifice their body and their health so that we can win Lombardi trophies. And every Sunday they need to go out and do that. But the locker room, practice, these are my areas. And when you come in, you can be a distraction in that endeavor. When you bring ESPN cameras into the draft room, things like that, I think ultimately started just really rubbing these guys the wrong way. So they kind of almost had different schools of thought, I would say. And listen, there's still some things that these guys are never going to agree on. If you get them in the same room and ask them who deserves credit for the Herschel Walker trade, you're never going to get the same answer. They're just that's how they feel, and that's how they're always going to feel. But I do think that they still have a lot of actual respect and admiration that's grown for each other. They've always had that to a certain degree, and I think that that's beautiful. It's okay to disagree with people forever and still get along. Jerry and Jimmy teach us that.
Maclain Ways, producer, director, co-director, executive producer of the new documentary on Netflix, America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys. I started to think about this with Jerry, and it's hard to tell a billionaire that they're wrong, and nobody's going to tell. Jerry's not going to listen to anybody. But I go back in his coaching tree, and it felt like there were only two coaches who didn't need Jerry. Yeah. Jerry, Brian Schottenheimer, Jason Garrett, Dave Campo, like these guys all needed this job. They needed Jerry. Bill Parcells did not need Jerry, and Jimmy Johnson did not. Does Jerry talk about who he's hired or why he's hired these coaches who, this is America's team? You would think you could get any coach that you wanted to coach these teams.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I didn't really dive into Jerry too much throughout each individual head coach that he's hired over the years. But we hung out a lot as he was making the Schottenheimer decision. And I don't know, for better or worse. And I did not grow up a Cowboys fan. So I grew up in Los Angeles in the late 90s. So I unfortunately didn't have an NFL team to root for. But so I didn't quite feel it as hard as the fans do. But Jerry, as he neared the Schottenheimer decision, talked about comfortability. That was like a big word that he used time and time again. He was comfortable with Schottenheimer, which did strike me as unique because this is a guy that has taken risk after risk after risk. And even with something like the Johnny Manziel story that he kind of tells about Steven being like, we're not going to draft Johnny Manziel, and Jerry being like, all right, we're not going to draft Johnny Manziel. But Jerry's retort is, that was a middle of the road decision. And I didn't build the Dallas Cowboys the way I did by making middle of the road decisions. You have to take risks because the reward is just, 10x what you can get. But Schottenheimer was a comfortable decision for Jerry, and I don't know if that's because he feels like he's very close to where he ultimately wants to get to a Super Bowl, and he doesn't want to change things up too much. But I was a little like, okay, interesting. We're not really making like a big, risky, splashy choice here. He's going to go with someone that he's comfortable with.
There's a quote that's attributed to The Athletic, and it's the Cowboys' 2023 playoff loss to the Packers, where midway through the fourth quarter, it's 48-16. And Jerry, in the documentary, says this loss hurt us in every way more than anyone we've ever had. That's the worst loss in Jerry Jones's career?
That's what he said. And man, we were with that team a lot in 2023. And ultimately, I think if they would have had a deep playoff run, it probably would have been a larger part of the documentary series, kind of following the team on the road that year and filming them a lot. And listen, I was on the Cowboys hype train that year too, because they were kind of undefeated at home. They had won, I think, like 16 games at AT&T, and they were coming in to play Green Bay, and I think they were the favorite, and I was looking forward to that game. But watching Jerry watch that game, I mean, that family got shell shocked that game. There's no doubt. Jerry was quiet and intense as he was watching what felt like a very good chance for hopefully a playoff run kind of crumble in front of him. And there was no doubt. I mean, it was like after that game, we had been at Cowboys games after losses before. This one was different. Obviously, it's the end of the season, so it carries that weight. But it just felt like this family had been through a very terrible experience watching Green Bay put up the numbers that they did against the Cowboys. And no doubt, Jerry said this loss hurt. It hurt on so many different levels, is what he said. He said it hurt. It set us back. It was a financial pain. It was a lot that he was talking about that loss in many ways. So yeah, I think it is the worst loss he ever experienced.
Does Jerry care too much?
It's interesting. I think that again, I wasn't a fan, so I know the 30 years that it's been, conceptually, but I don't quite feel it as a fan. So I don't quite know what that pain feels like. But the one thing that sometimes I would read that I just personally disagreed with was like that Jerry doesn't want to win. It's like all this family wants is one more Super Bowl for Jerry. Like they really like my experience just being around them is like, yes, this is a tremendously successful franchise off field. They do the brand building, they do the people talking about the team incredibly, incredibly well. But at the end of the day, I think that they are starting to get that sense of urgency that listen, and I think even Charlotte says this in the documentary, we don't have a lot of there's next seasons. Well, there's always next seasons because their dad is getting older and older. And I think more than anything, what this family wants for Jerry is one more Super Bowl. And I think Jerry certainly wants that too.
Being around him, knowing what's going on with Micah Parsons, your sense is what?
My sense is that Jerry is like very comfortable in these situations, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think for probably Cowboys fans, it's not a good thing, but I don't think that he sweats in these situations, which I think normally motivates most people to be like, all right, I got to go sign one of my star players to a long-term contract and lock him up early. And for some reason, Jerry doesn't quite feel he even says it. He's like, I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm comfortable with ambiguity, And so it was an interesting process to see him be like that. So I don't know why he necessarily does these things the way he does, or maybe there's more information. I don't know. Maybe there's things on Micah's team that they're not responding to or doing. I don't know enough about it. But I know that Jerry's very comfortable in these situations, which doesn't make me think that things are going to change necessarily.
What's the next documentary with you and your brother?
Oh, actually, we don't know. Actually, we're going to take a little time off. We had a three-part doc that came out in December of this last year. That took us a while, and then this was an eight-parter. So we do the Untold series on Netflix. We'll probably jump back in and do a little bit more hands-on producing there, which we're really excited about. But right now, we don't have anything in the hopper. We're going to take a little time off and then try and tackle something hopefully as big. But this one was tremendously fun. I mean, it was the first football documentary we made. I absolutely fell in love with the sport, and just following the Cowboys around and really getting to meet these guys, Troy, Emmett, Michael, Dion, Barry, Jimmy. They were all just phenomenal interviewees.
Congrats to you and your brother. Great stuff, and good luck with the documentary.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on, Dan.
That's Maclain Way, producer, director. He's the co-director, executive producer of the new documentary on Netflix, America's Team, The Gambler, and his Cowboys.